The click of Alistair Finch's expensive pen on his glass-topped desk was the loudest sound in the room, each tap a tiny, condescending punctuation mark to his monologue. I'd been summoned, on a Tuesday, just after lunch, to the sterile expanse of the new Chief Technology Officer's office. It still smelled of paint and unearned ambition. Finch, all sharp angles and sharper haircut, barely out of his 30s, hadn't even bothered with pleasantries. "Martin," he'd begun, his voice smooth, almost soothing, like a doctor about to deliver a terminal diagnosis. "Apex Solutions is entering a new era. An era of streamlined efficiency, agile development, and AI-driven automation." He smiled, a brief, bloodless gesture. "And frankly, the kind of deep-dive manual documentation architecture you've managed, well, it's becoming a legacy concern. 20 years, 2 decades I'd poured into Apex, specifically into Olympus, the documentation system I hadn't just managed, but birthed. Olympus wasn't a collection of files. It was an intricate, living ecosystem of interconnected knowledge, a sprawling web of proprietary data structures, cross-reference product specifications, regulatory compliance pathways, and historical engineering decisions. It was the company's institutional memory, meticulously curated, ensuring that every new product, every software update, every safety protocol was anchored in accuracy and comprehensibility. I was its architect, its librarian, its shaman. The layers of tribal knowledge embedded within Olympus, the unspoken rules of its logic, the ghosts of retired projects and their learned lessons, these weren't things you could feed into a prompt. We've invested in a state-of-the-art AI, Martin. DocuBot 5000. He leaned back, steepling his fingers, the picture of disruptive innovation. It can generate comprehensive documentation in minutes. What takes your department weeks, this AI handles before breakfast. The cost savings are significant. His gaze flicked to a spreadsheet on one of his many monitors, then back to me, dismissive. "So, as part of this strategic realignment, your role as senior technical analyst and documentation architect is being made redundant. Redundant, like an obsolete part, easily swapped out." The word hung in the air, cold and clinical. My heart, which had been thudding a dull premonition since the summons, seemed to seize. I thought of the early days, cobbling together the first version of Olympus on aging servers, long nights fueled by stale coffee, and a fervent belief in clarity and order. I remembered countless engineers, panicking before a critical launch, whom I'd guided through the labyrinthine depths of some forgotten component's documentation, saving projects, reputations, and no small amount of money. I found my voice, a reedy thing. Alistair, Olympus is not just text generation. The interdependencies, the custom parsing scripts for legacy data, the regulatory validation loops I built in. An AI won't understand the underlying logic without. He waved a hand, a gesture of impatient finality. "Martin, I appreciate your dedication over the years. Truly. But the future is here. We need to be lean, adaptive. The AI has been trained on terabytes of data. It'll learn. It'll adapt." The utter confidence in his voice, the unshakable belief in his shiny new toy, was staggering. He had no comprehension of what he was discarding, the intellectual scaffolding that held up so much of Apex's operations. He saw lines of text. I saw a delicate, crucial circulatory system. He offered a severance package, the corporate standard, an insultingly generic parachute for 2 decades of specialized mission-critical work. "We wish you the best in your future endeavors," he said, his tone already moving on to the next item on his agenda. As I walked out of his office, the silence from my own soon-to-be vacated space felt like a roar. He honestly believed an algorithm could replicate the intricate, human-forged wisdom of Olympus. He believed it could do my job. The quiet fury began to kindle then, not hot and reckless, but cold, methodical, and deep. He would learn. They all would. The final packing of my desk was a somber ritual. Each framed photo of my family, each quirky little memento from past projects, each well-worn technical manual I kept for reference, they all felt like relics of a forgotten age. Sarah, my most trusted senior writer and the closest thing I had to an apprentice on Olympus, watched with a quiet sadness. "This is madness, Martin," she whispered, when we were alone for a moment amidst the cardboard boxes. "Finch doesn't have a clue what you've built. He thinks it's just a fancy word processor." I nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Keep your head down, Sarah, and keep your eyes open." I didn't need to elaborate. She understood. The day I walked out of Apex Solutions, the late autumn air felt crisp and strangely liberating. The initial shock, the dull ache of betrayal, was already solidifying into something else. A grim resolve. Finch had made his move based on arrogance and ignorance. My move, when it came, would be based on knowledge and patience. He said AI could do my job. The panic would kick in when they realized just how wrong he was and how deeply intertwined my work was with their very ability to function, to comply, to even exist safely in their industry. The first few weeks were a blur of forced domesticity and internal recalibration. My wife, bless her pragmatic heart, was a pillar of support, though the financial uncertainty gnawed at both of us. But beneath the surface turmoil, a plan was taking shape. I started to document Olympus not for Apex, but for myself, sketching out its core architecture, its unique logical constructs, the very things Finch had dismissed. I remembered his cavalier statements during town halls about legacy systems, and his thinly veiled disdain for anyone who'd been with the company longer than his MBA program. The signs, in hindsight, had been neon bright. He saw experience not as an asset, but as an impediment to his vision of a frictionless, AI-powered utopia. It was this fundamental misjudgment, this chronic underestimation, that would be his undoing. While Finch was busy issuing press releases about Apex's brave new world of automated documentation, I was quietly laying the groundwork for my own. I researched forming a consultancy, talked to a lawyer, and began sketching out a business plan. I called it Helios Compliance Solutions. Helios, the sun god, who sees all. A subtle nod to the illumination I intended to bring one way or another. News from Apex trickled in, mostly through Sarah. Initially, it was all triumphalism. DocuBot 5000 was, according to Finch's internal communiques, exceeding expectations. It spat out thousands of pages of documentation, formatted consistently, its digital voice tireless. He's parading it around like a conquering hero. Sarah told me during one of our discreet calls, "New user manuals for the XR700 drone are already published. Took the bot about 6 hours." My blood ran cold. The XR700 drone project involved multiple restricted flight systems and stringent FAA compliance protocols. The original Olympus documentation for its predecessors contained terabytes of highly specific interlinked safety data, cross-referenced against years of incident reports and regulatory updates. An AI, even a sophisticated one, couldn't possibly grasp the nuanced evolution of those safety cases from publicly available data. It would generate text that looked plausible but lacked the critical, hard-won wisdom. "How's the accuracy, Sarah?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. A pause. "Well, it's voluminous," she said, a careful choice of words. "The engineers are a bit swamped trying to verify it. Some of the senior guys are grumbling. Things don't quite line up with the older systems. Cross-references are broken, a lot of the legacy system integration points are just missing context. The first cracks. Subtle, perhaps, to Finch. But to me, they were the telltale tremors before an earthquake. He'd praised the AI for doing in minutes what took me weeks. He didn't understand that those weeks were spent not just writing, but thinking, verifying, integrating, and ensuring the profound accuracy that underpinned our certifications and safety records. DocuBot 5000 was a high-speed photocopier with a thesaurus. Olympus, under my stewardship, had been a thinking, evolving brain, and that brain was now offline, replaced by a shallow mimic. I continued my work on Helios, my resolve hardening. The leverage point wasn't a forgotten contractual clause. It was the very nature of Olympus, its intricate, irreplaceable design known truly only to me. The grumbling within Apex, as relayed by Sarah, grew louder over the subsequent months. The engineers, once Finch's champions of disruption, were now mired in a bog of DocuBot 5000's prolific but often nonsensical output. Sarah described one meeting where a lead engineer for the vital Guardian medical implant series, a device with life or death implications, held up a 100-page AI-generated safety protocol manual and declared it beautifully formatted gibberish. Apparently, DocuBot, in its eagerness to streamline, had omitted several critical warnings related to electromagnetic interference, warnings that were embedded deep within Olympus's historical data from an almost forgotten incident with a similar device a decade prior. The AI, trained on generic medical device documentation, had no access to this proprietary, highly specific tribal knowledge. It produced text that was syntactically correct but semantically lethal. Finch, however, remained oblivious, cocooned in his executive suite, insulated by layers of yes-men who likely feared pointing out the Emperor's new algorithmic clothes. He touted a recent audit of their quality management system as a success, probably because the auditors had only spot-checked newly generated, surface-level documents, not the deep, interconnected technical specifications that underpin true compliance. My own venture, Helios Compliance Solutions, was slowly taking shape. I wasn't just biding my time, I was actively building. My focus was on human-centered compliance recovery, a deliberate contrast to Finch's AI-first dogma. I reached out to my network, quietly letting it be known that Martin Hale was back in the game, albeit under a new banner. The irony wasn't lost on me that my first few consultations involved helping smaller firms untangle messes created by their own overly optimistic forays into AI documentation without proper oversight. Each successful intervention was a validation, a quiet sharpening of the tools I would eventually deploy on a grander scale. Sarah, bless her loyal heart, became an invaluable, albeit covert, source. One evening, an encrypted file landed in my inbox. It contained a fragment of the FAA compliance submission for the XR700 drone, the one DocuBot 5000 had supposedly mastered. My stomach churned as I reviewed it. It was riddled with subtle but critical errors. Legacy failsafe procedures were misquoted, maximum operational altitude data conflicted with sensor limitation specifications documented elsewhere, a link Olympus would have flagged instantly, and an entire section on battery thermal runaway protocols specific to a proprietary Apex battery design was missing crucial mitigating actions, replaced with generic boilerplate. This wasn't just poor documentation. This was an accident waiting to happen, a regulatory time bomb. I meticulously documented the discrepancies, filing them away, knowing their time would come. The tipping point arrived not with a bang, but with a series of increasingly frantic, official-looking letters. An unexpected audit by the Federal Aviation Administration, triggered by an anonymous tip-off regarding safety documentation discrepancies for the XR700 drone, descended upon Apex Solutions. Simultaneously, whispers began in the medical device forums about potential irregularities in the updated FDA submission for the Guardian implant. Finch, I heard through Sarah, was initially dismissive. Bureaucratic red tape, he'd apparently snorted. Our AI is cutting edge. These regulators are just behind the times. His arrogance, it seemed, was still fully operational. But then the initial findings started to filter through. The FAA auditors, experienced and unyielding, were not impressed by DocuBot 5000's prolific output. They were interested in accuracy, traceability, and consistency with validated engineering data, the very soul of Olympus, which Finch had exercised. The fines, when they were announced, were staggering. Millions for the XR700 non-compliance, with a potential grounding order for the entire fleet if immediate, verifiable corrective actions weren't taken. The FDA investigation into the Guardian implant was even more ominous, threatening a product recall and potential criminal negligence charges if systemic failures in documentation control were proven. Apex's stock price took a predictable nosedive. Finch's name, once celebrated in trade rags as a visionary, was now synonymous with a costly, embarrassing debacle. His streamlined efficiency had streamlined them directly into a regulatory meat grinder. This was the moment. With news of Apex's troubles beginning to break across industry news sites, Helios Compliance Solutions launched its full website and marketing push. The tagline, "When AI fails, human expertise prevails," I penned a series of articles on the critical role of curated institutional knowledge in high-stakes compliance, the dangers of over-reliance on inadequately supervised AI in technical documentation, and the indispensable value of experienced human oversight. These weren't vengeful diatribes, but cool, reasoned analyses hitting all the pain points Apex was now excruciatingly experiencing. Then came the masterstroke. Innovate Corp, Apex's largest and fiercest competitor, had been watching the unfolding drama with keen interest. Their CTO, a seasoned veteran who understood the value of robust systems, reached out. We met. I didn't need to sell him on the dangers of what Apex had done. He saw it clearly. Instead, I sold him on the strength of proactive, human-centric compliance, leveraging deep institutional knowledge, precisely what Helios offered. Innovate Corp signed Helios Compliance Solutions to a substantial retainer to review and enhance their existing documentation frameworks, specifically to future-proof them against the kind of vulnerabilities Apex had exposed. The press release from Innovate Corp was subtle but devastating to Apex. Innovate Corp partners with Helios Compliance Solutions to reinforce industry-leading documentation standards, ensuring unparalleled safety and regulatory adherence. Martin Hale, the redundant legacy, was now visibly fortifying their chief rival. The Schadenfreude was a quiet, satisfying hum beneath my professional demeanor. Finch, I heard, was no longer taking calls. The panic, I presumed, had well and truly kicked in. The fallout for Apex Solutions was swift and brutal. Alistair Finch was quietly separated from the company, a sterile euphemism for being made the primary scapegoat. The acting CEO, a beleaguered-looking woman named Eleanor Vance, who'd been with Apex in finance for 15 years, was left to navigate the smoldering wreckage. The fines were just the beginning. The cost of remediating the documentation, rebuilding trust with regulators, and potentially recalling products threatened to cripple them. Engineers were jumping ship. Morale was at an all-time low. Olympus, the system Finch had dismissed as a relic, was now understood to be the Ark of the Covenant, and they had carelessly tossed it overboard, only realizing its value as the floodwaters rose. 6 months to the day after Finch had informed me that an AI could do my job, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Apex Solutions. I let it go to voicemail. A message from Eleanor Vance followed, her voice strained but polite, requesting an urgent meeting. I agreed, not out of any lingering loyalty, but out of a carefully cultivated sense of dramatic timing. We met in a neutral conference room, not the gleaming tower of Apex. Eleanor looked exhausted. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Martin, she began, her voice heavy with the weight of her company's crisis. We made a catastrophic mistake, a monumental error in judgment. Finch, well, he didn't understand. We didn't understand. What you built with Olympus, it was foundational. She outlined the extent of the damage, far worse than what had been publicly reported. They were hemorrhaging money, talent, and credibility. Regulatory bodies were breathing down their necks, demanding comprehensive, verifiable documentation that their current chaotic systems, and certainly not DocuBot 5000, could produce. We need you back, Martin, she said, her gaze direct, pleading. Name your price. We need you to come in, fix Olympus, fix the compliance issues. We need you to save us. I listened patiently, the picture of calm, reflective consideration. The quiet fury I'd felt that day in Finch's office had long since cooled, replaced by a resolute, almost serene sense, Pallas Athena of inevitability. This was the moment I had meticulously planned for, the culmination of their arrogance and my calculated patience. When she finished, I took a slow breath. Eleanor, I said, my tone gentle but firm, I appreciate the candor, and I understand the predicament Apex is in. However, Helios Compliance Solutions is fully committed to its current clients, including, as you know, Innovate Corp. A faint wince crossed her face. My personal involvement in day-to-day remediation at Apex simply isn't feasible. I've moved on. I saw the hope drain from her eyes, replaced by a flicker of despair. She started to protest, to reiterate their desperation. I held up a hand. However, I continued, letting the pause hang for a moment. Helios has been developing a solution that might be of interest. It's an AI-powered compliance and documentation integrity platform. We call it Helios Oracle. Her brow furrowed, confused. But AI is what got us into this mess. I smiled, a genuine, albeit somewhat ironic smile. Not all AI is created equal, Eleanor. DocuBot 5000 was a generic tool, superficially trained. Helios Oracle has been meticulously engineered and trained by experts. Specifically, it incorporates the core architectural principles of Olympus, the very logic and interconnectedness that made it so robust. It's trained on my understanding of how such complex systems must be managed to ensure absolute integrity. Her eyes widened slightly as the implication began to dawn. We're prepared to offer Apex Solutions a licensing agreement for Helios Oracle, I stated, my voice level. It will provide the framework and the intelligent oversight to rebuild your documentation, ensure compliance, and integrate with your existing engineering workflows far more effectively and safely than your previous approach. I named the price, an annual licensing fee equivalent to 10 times my old salary, plus a substantial upfront integration and training fee payable to Helios Compliance Solutions. The silence in the room was profound. Eleanor's expression shifted from despair to stunned comprehension. The sheer audacity, the poetic justice, was not lost on her. She knew they had no other viable option. So, I concluded, allowing a hint of my earlier quiet determination to surface, leaning forward slightly. It turns out AI can do my job, Eleanor. I paused, letting the weight of it land. After I taught it how, there was no gloating in my voice, only the quiet satisfaction of a meticulously executed plan coming to fruition, a restoration of balance. The true value wasn't in the algorithm itself, but in the decades of human experience, the nuanced understanding, and the relentless pursuit of excellence that had taught it. And for that lesson, Apex Solutions would now pay dearly. My reflection was simple. Respect the architect, understand the foundation, or prepare to pay for the reconstruction. And sometimes, if you're very lucky or very methodical, the original architect gets to set the terms.